The wheat was almost ready. Harl Dunnow could tell by the color. 31 years of farming the same land had taught him to read a field the way other men read books. The stalks were gold at the tips, still green near the roots. Another week, maybe 10 days. Then harvest. He was walking the east edge of the property, checking the fence line where the old posts had started to lean when the shadow came. It did not move like a cloud shadow. Cloud shadows drift slow and soft. This one fell hard and fast, like a curtain dropping across the whole field at once. Harl stopped walking. He looked up. The thing in the sky was enormous. Dark gray, shaped somewhere between a wedge and a fist. No wings, no visible engine fire. It just came down, quiet as a held breath, flattening the air beneath it until the wheat bent sideways and Harl had to grab his hat with both hands. It landed in the open pasture beyond the south tree line. The ground shook, not like an earthquake, more like a very large, very heavy thing had simply decided to sit down. Harl stood there for a moment. He was 64 years old. His knees hurt most mornings. He had buried a wife, a dog, and one good tractor in the last decade. He was not a man who startled easily. He picked up the bucket of water he had set down and walked toward the pasture. The ship, if that was what it was, had legs. 4 of them, thick as grain silos, sunk into the soft earth of the pasture. Steam or smoke rose from somewhere along its underside. There was a smell like hot metal and something underneath that, sharp and strange, like nothing Harl had a name for. A ramp extended from the ship's belly. It came down slowly. Harl stopped at the fence and waited. 3 of them came out first. Tall, very tall, 7 feet, at least, maybe more. They wore dark armor that covered everything, and they moved the way soldiers move, watching every direction at once. Behind them came a 4th, bigger than the others. The armor was different too. Older looking, marked up with scratches and dents that had never been repaired, like the creature wearing it had decided the damage was worth keeping. That one stopped at the base of the ramp and looked at Harl. Harl looked back. The face was hard to read. Not a human face. The eyes were set wide, pale gold, unblinking. The jaw was too angular, the skin scaled and dark green, like river rock that had been in the water a long time. There were no ears that Harl could see, just flat ridges along the sides of the head. The big one stared at him. Harl got the sense it was waiting for him to run. He did not run. He shifted the bucket to his left hand and raised his right in a slow wave. The big one did not move. One of the armored soldiers behind it made a sound, low and clicking, like a radiator working hard in winter. The big one made a sound back. Shorter, flat. Harl had a sandwich in his jacket pocket. He had forgotten about it until that moment. He pulled it out. Ham and mustard, wrapped in wax paper, made that morning before he left the house. He held it out toward the large creature. Nothing happened for a long time. The soldier to the left made the clicking sound again, louder this time. The big one raised one hand, and the soldier went quiet. Then the big one walked forward. It stopped at the fence, a few feet from Harl. Up close it was even larger. The ground felt different when it stood near, like the air had more weight in it. Harl could see markings on the armor now. Not scratches. Symbols carved deliberately. There were a lot of them. The creature looked at the sandwich. "It's ham," Harl said. "Don't know if that means anything to you." The pale gold eyes moved up from the sandwich to Harl's face. There was something in that look that Harl could not quite name. Not anger, not hunger. Something more like confusion, deep and genuine, the look of something encountering a problem it had no category for. The creature did not take the sandwich. Harl set it on the fence post between them. "It'll keep," he said. "You look like you've had a rough landing. That smoke coming off the back end of your ship is probably something you want to look at." The creature's eyes moved to the ship, then back to Harl. "About water too," Harl said, and held up the bucket. "Don't know if your kind drinks water. Most things do." He paused. "Well, come on up to the house if you need anything. I'll put a pot on." He turned and walked back the way he came. Behind him, he heard nothing for a moment. Then a sound, low and slow, like the creature was exhaling for the first time in a very long while. When Harl got back to the house and looked out the kitchen window, the big one was still standing at the fence. Not moving, just standing there, looking at the place where Harl had been. The sandwich was still on the post, but the creature's head was tilted just slightly, like it was thinking about something it had never thought about before. Harl put the kettle on. The kittens were 3 weeks old and had not yet opened their eyes all the way. There were 4 of them, piled in a shallow wooden box near the back wall of the barn, tucked into an old horse blanket that Harl had folded 3 times for softness. The mother, a gray tabby named Dot, watched from the top of a hay bale with the calm authority of a creature who had decided she trusted no one completely but would allow limited visitors. Harl had checked on them that morning as usual. He had not expected to have company. The big alien, the one Harl had mentally started calling the commander on account of the way the others looked at it before doing anything, stood in the barn doorway with its wide gold eyes fixed on the box. It had followed Harl in from the yard without being asked. The 2 smaller soldiers had come as far as the barn door and then stopped there, watching. The commander did not go closer. It just looked. One of the kittens made a sound, thin and small, not even really a cry, more like a question mark made into noise. The commander's head moved a fraction. Born 3 weeks back, Harl said, for where he stood by the workbench. Mother showed up last winter, half-starved. Fed her through the cold, and she decided to stay. That's usually how it goes with cats. He went back to checking the latch on the old feed cabinet, which had been sticking since spring. The commander remained in the same spot. A minute passed, then another. One of the kittens, the orange one that Harl privately thought of as the troublemaker, had worked itself free of the pile and was now crawling in a slow, wobbling arc along the bottom of the box. Its legs were not in full agreement with each other yet. It reached the edge of the box, climbed over with great effort, and dropped to the barn floor with a soft sound. It lay there for a second. Then it got up, steadied itself, and began walking in the direction of the door, in the direction of the commander. Harl watched. The commander looked down. The kitten reached its boot, bumped its face against the dark armored surface, found it acceptable, and sat down against it. It fell asleep. 11 minutes passed. Harl timed it on the watch his wife had given him. The commander did not move, did not shift its weight, did not make a sound. It stood with the kitten against its boot like a statue that had decided sleeping kittens were its new responsibility. From outside came the sound of jets. Not close. High up, circling. They had been there since yesterday. Harl had expected them sooner, honestly. The commander's eyes moved upward. Its posture changed, the kind of change Harl recognized from watching his old dog go from relaxed to alert. Ready. They won't do anything, Harl said without looking up from the cabinet latch. Not while you're here with me. They're not foolish. The commander looked at him. Governments are careful, Harl said. It's ordinary people who do things without thinking. He got the latch to catch and nodded to himself. You want to see the rest of the place? He did not wait for an answer. He walked out of the barn and across the yard toward the chicken coop. After a moment, he heard the heavy footsteps behind him. The chickens did not like the commander. They voiced this opinion loudly and all at once. Harl told them to quiet down, and they mostly listened. He showed the commander the laying boxes, the water line, the automatic feeder he had built himself from old pipe and a plastic drum. The commander examined the feeder for a long time, bending close, studying the mechanism. Its hands, when it reached out to touch one of the pipe joints, were large and had too many fingers, but the gesture was careful. Gentle, even. Built that maybe 6 years back, Harl said. Took me a few tries. First version dumped feed all at once, and we had a chicken ride. The commander straightened up and made a short sound. The young soldier, Senna, called from across the yard in that clicking language. The commander clicked something back. Short, sharp. Senna came forward slowly. It was smaller than the commander, the armor less marked up. It moved like something that was nervous but trying hard not to show it. It speaks your language, Harl said, nodding at Senna. Somewhat. We established that this morning. Senna straightened. I understand your speech. Partially. The voice was strange, like words being produced by something not built for them. The commander asks, why did you come toward us? Yesterday, when we landed. Harl thought about that for a moment. Seemed like the thing to do, he said. You were in my pasture. Senna relayed this. The commander made a sound. The commander says, Senna continued slowly, that every species we have approached. has run or attacked. Harl scratched the back of his neck. Well, he said, I'm 64. My running days are mostly behind me. He looked at the commander. Come in for supper tonight. I'm making stew. He went back inside. Behind him, the commander stood in the yard for a long time, looking at the house, at the fields, at the ordinary geometry of a working farm. Then it looked at the sky where the jets still circled. Then back at the house. It did not leave. The kitchen table had 4 chairs. Harl had not sat at all 4 of them in several years. He pulled 2 out, set a bowl on each side, and ladled out the stew from the pot that had been going since afternoon. Beef, potatoes, carrots, onion. The bread was store-bought, 2 days old, still decent. The commander sat in the chair across from him. The chair made a sound under the weight, but held. Senna stood near the door. Harl had offered a chair too, but it had declined, which Harl suspected was some kind of military protocol. The commander looked at the stew bowl for a moment. Then it looked at Harl. Harl ate a spoonful. Go ahead, he said. If it turns out to be poison for your kind, I apologize in advance. The commander picked up the spoon. The spoon looked very small in its hand. It tried a small amount of the broth. Its eyes did not change expression exactly, but something in the set of its jaw shifted just slightly. It ate. They sat in the warm kitchen and ate stew while the sun went down outside and the jets circled overhead in the dark. Harl had the radio on low, some old country station out of Billings, half static, half steel guitar. He did not turn it off. After a while, Harl said, My wife used to make this. Better than I do. She put time in it. I always forget the time. The commander looked at him. She passed 4 years back, Harl said. Hard in the end, though she'd been fighting other things for longer than that. He broke a piece of bread. You got family? Senna translated. Haltingly. There seemed to be some difficulty finding the right word for family. Eventually, Senna said, Vreth do not have. What you call family. They're units. Military units. From young age. So you grow up in the service, Harl said. Yes. Harl nodded. He had known men like that. Understood the shape of it, even if the details were different. And the commander, he said, has been in command a long time. Senna spoke. The commander answered, and for a moment its voice was different. Slower. Something less guarded in the tone. Since age of 9 cycles, Senna said. Your years, approximately 12. Harl set his spoon down. 12 years old, he said quietly. Not a question. Nobody said anything for a moment. On the counter near the window, there was a photograph in a plain wood frame. A woman in a sun hat, standing in the wheat field, laughing at something outside the frame. The commander's eyes had found it sometime during the meal and kept returning to it. That's my wife, Harl said, when he noticed where the commander was looking. Nora. 37 years we were on this land together. He looked at the photo. I still talk to her sometimes. Out in the field. Probably crazy. Senna translated. The commander said something. Slow. Careful. Senna took a moment. The commander asks, What is? Missing someone. The feeling. We do not have a word for this in our language. Harl thought about that for a long time. It's like he started and stopped. It's like a room in your house where someone used to be. And the room is still there, and everything in it is the same. But it's quiet in a different way than it used to be. He paused. You notice the quiet more than you noticed the noise when it was there. Senna translated. The commander sat very still. Outside, a jet passed low enough that the window rattled softly. Harl looked up at the ceiling, then back down. They'll want to talk to you soon, he said. The government people. They'll send somebody official. Try to set up some kind of meeting. Yes, Senna said. What happens then? Harl asked. Not afraid. Just asking. Senna translated. The commander's answer was short. Unknown, Senna said. Harl nodded and picked his spoon back up. Well, unknown is honest. He gestured at the commander's bowl. There's more on the stove if you want it. The commander looked at the bowl. At the stove? At the photograph of Nora on the counter. It held out the bowl. Harl got up and refilled it without any fuss, set it back down, and sat back in his own chair. The radio played something soft and old. The pot on the stove ticked as it cooled. The jets made their wide circles overhead, and nobody at the kitchen table paid them much attention. Then the commander said something without waiting for Senna to prompt it. Just said it slow, like it had been deciding whether to say it at all. Senna was quiet for a moment. Then, the commander says, "This is the first meal, eaten without purpose, in its life." Harl looked across the table. "Well," he said, "then you're welcome back anytime." The commander looked at the photograph of Nora again, and then it did something Harl did not expect. Nothing dramatic, nothing large. It simply sat back in a chair, just slightly, just enough to be different from the way a soldier sits, and it finished its stew. 3 fence posts on the east side had been bothering Harl for 2 weeks. The ground there drained slow after rain, and slow drainage rotted posts faster than anything. He had the new posts cut and ready, leaning against the barn wall. He had the wire stretcher, the staple gun, the level. What he did not have was a back that agreed with post hole digging anymore. He had planned to start after breakfast. He was pulling on his work gloves when he came out the door and found the commander already standing in the yard, looking at the leaning posts along the east fence line. Harl walked over. The commander did not look at him, just kept looking at the fence. "They need to come out and come back in straight," Harl said. Senna, who had come to stand a few feet behind the commander, translated. The commander made a short sound and bent down, grabbed the first leaning post with one hand, and pulled it out of the ground like a man pulling a weed. "Well," Harl said, "that's one way to do it." They worked through the morning. Harl directed. The commander dug or pulled as needed. It was quick work with that kind of strength. Harl ran the wire and used the stretcher to pull it tight between the posts while the commander held each post perfectly still at the angle Harl told it to hold. The level said straight every time. Senna sat on a fence rail and watched, and occasionally translated when Harl had specific instructions about depth or spacing. After a while, Senna stopped waiting for Harl to ask and just started offering information. "This soil, it holds water long," it said, watching the commander tamp the 3rd post down. "Our soil at home base, it is dry, red. Red soil usually drains fast," Harl said. "Yes," Senna said. "Too fast. We have water issues." Harl glanced over. "Farming on your world?" "Not exactly. Supply maintenance. Growing food for units." Senna paused. "It is harder than it looks, we think, from far away." Harl smiled a little at that. Everybody thinks that. By midday, the fence was done. For new posts, wire rerun on 2 sections, a gate hinge adjusted that had been squeaking since spring. Harl walked the line and checked each post by hand. "Good and solid." He nodded. The commander watched him check the work. There was something focused in how it watched, not just looking but actually paying attention, like it was filing the process away somewhere. Harl had noticed that about it. The commander watched everything with that quality. Not suspicion, more like study, like it was learning the shape of things it had never seen before. They sat on the tailgate of Harl's truck and drank water. The commander was too large for the tailgate, really, but it sat there anyway. The jets had pulled back farther this morning, still there, but higher, giving more distance. Harl figured somebody had made some calls. His radio crackled from his shirt pocket. A government liaison number he had been given yesterday. He looked at it. "They want to talk to you officially," Harl said, looking at the commander. "I'll keep out of it if you want. It's your business." Senna translated. The commander looked at the radio, then at Harl, then out at the repaired fence. It said something. Senna said, "The commander says, your government will ask what our mission was when we landed." "Yes," Harl said, "they will." Another short exchange. The commander says, "The mission was to assess whether your species was a threat that required to be removed." Senna's voice was careful and flat in the way Harl recognized as trying not to add anything extra to the words. Harl turned the water bottle in his hands. A field hawk was working the edge of the tree line, hunting slow in wide loops. "And what's the assessment now?" Harl asked. The commander looked at the fence they had built together, looked at the farm, at the barn where the kittens were, at the kitchen window where Harl ate alone most evenings with the radio on and a photograph of his wife on the counter. It spoke. Senna took a moment. "The commander says, the assessment is, this species does not behave as recorded in any prior contact file." Another pause. "You should not be approached with weapons. You should be approached with." The commander does not have a word. Something like, "Patience." Harl nodded slowly. He answered the radio. The conversation with the liaison was short. He told them the commander was not hostile, that there were things to discuss, and that it would be better if they sent one person, not a convoy. The liaison asked how he could be sure it was safe. Harl thought about that. Because, he said, we spent the morning fixing a fence and nobody got hurt. He hung up, handed the radio to Senna. They'll want to do this officially. You should handle the rest. Senna looked at the commander. The commander said one word. Acceptable, Senna said. Harl climbed down from the tailgate, knees complaining. I'll make lunch, he said. You can use the kitchen table if you need somewhere to sit for a meeting. The chair survived last night. He went inside. The commander remained on the tailgate for a moment, alone, looking out at the east fence line. 4 straight posts. Wire pulled clean and tight. A gate that no longer squeaked. It had destroyed cities. Cracked moons in half for tactical gain. Left scorched stone where civilizations had stood. It sat on a truck tailgate in Montana and looked at a repaired fence and felt something it had no word for in any language it knew. 17 species were watching. Coordinator Brell had not planned for it to become a broadcast. She had flagged the Darrow landing as a potential incident and set up a monitoring relay as standard procedure. But word moved fast among council observers, and by the time Darrow, cataloged in 17 different threat databases as an extinction-level combatant, had been on a human farm for 36 hours with 0 confirmed aggression, nobody was looking away. The feed showed the fence repair. Several council members had to be told what a fence was. Brell watched the playback again. The human, old and slow-moving, directing the most dangerous individual organism in the known Dominion fleet. The alien warlord holding a wooden post at whatever angle the old man asked for. She began dictating her notes for the formal report. Initial hypothesis, controlled environment, possible sedation or unknown influence on subject Darrow. Discarded after hour 12. No chemical agents detected. No technological manipulation. The human is simply being. She stopped. Started again. The human is simply being kind. And this appears to be sufficient. On the farm, Harl's son arrived. Reed Dunnow was 38, drove a dusty pickup, and had not been told about the aliens. He had been told only that his father had a situation at the farm, and could he come. Reed had assumed a medical situation, maybe the tractor again. He turned off the gravel road and onto the farm track and saw the ship. He stopped the truck. He sat for almost 2 full minutes looking at it. Then he got out slowly, one hand on the door, and stood looking across the yard to where his father was sitting on the porch steps with what appeared to be a 7-foot scaled alien and a smaller one beside it. Harl raised a hand. Reed, come on over. Reed walked over. Slowly. This is the commander, Harl said. And that's Senna. They landed day before yesterday. Commander, this is my son Reed. The commander looked at Reed. Reed looked at the commander. Hi, Reed said. Senna translated. The commander said something. The commander says Senna offered. You have your father's posture? Reed blinked. Is that a good thing? Yes, Senna said. In the commander's assessment. Reed sat down on the step below his father's. He pulled out his phone, looked at it, looked at the commander. Can I take a picture? Senna translated. The commander made a sound that might have been a short laugh or something close to it. Yes, Senna said. Reed took the picture. He looked at it. Then he put the phone away and seemed to make a decision. So he said, where are you from? And then it was Senna, not Brell, not any diplomatic official, who started talking about the stars near Vreth space. The color of the sky over the Dominion's homeworld, which was 2 suns and a long dusk and no real night for half the year. The way the ships looked coming into dock at the main fleet port, lit up from below by the planet's reflection. Reed listened. Then he said, man, I'd love to see that someday. Senna was quiet for a moment. Then it said something Harl had not expected. It said, perhaps someday you could. On the observation feed, Coordinator Brell stopped dictating and sat very still. That evening, the official liaison arrived. One person, as Harl had asked, a quiet woman from some office Harl did not know the full name of. She sat at the kitchen table with the commander and Senna and spoke for 3 hours. Harl stayed out of it. He sat on the porch and watched the stars come out with Reed, who had decided to stay the night. They going to be okay? Reed asked, meaning the commander and Senna. I think so, Harl said. You're not worried? Harl thought about it honestly. I was a little the first 5 minutes, he said. Then it just seemed like they needed somewhere to land. Reed was quiet for a while. Mom would have fed them too, he said. Yes, she would, Harl said. Probably made them bring the bowls in when they were done. Reed smiled. So did Harl. They sat with that for a while. Inside, the commander was explaining to the liaison that the Vreth Dominion would receive a report. The liaison asked what the report would say. The commander was quiet for a moment. Then it said, through Senna, that the report would state that Earth was not a viable military target. The liaison asked why. The commander looked at the kitchen window, where through the glass, the porch light showed the old man and his son sitting in the dark and talking about nothing in particular. Because the commander said, there is no tactical model for what this species does. Brell recorded that. She would include it, word for word, in her formal submission to the council. Upstairs, the orange kitten had somehow gotten into the house and was asleep on the commander's jacket, which it had left on a chair. Nobody moved it. The claim was filed on a Tuesday. A species called the Garath had been watching Earth from a distance for some years. Not with any urgency, just keeping track. Earth was a small, isolated world, not yet capable of interstellar travel, no standing galactic presence, no formal council membership. Under older territorial rules, an unclaimed death world was open to resource extraction once no active protection order existed. The Garath filed the paperwork in the standard way, a routine claim. They expected no objection. Earth had no allies, or so they believed. The counterfiling arrived 41 minutes later. The Galactic Council clerk who processed it read the name on the counterclaim 3 times. Then he called his supervisor. His supervisor read it and called her supervisor. Within an hour, it had been flagged for emergency review. The counterclaim was filed by Darrow of the Vreth Dominion, formerly Supreme Commander of the 3rd Vreth Expansion Fleet, cataloged in 7 Council threat registries, known, in less formal records, as the Destroyer of the Keth Worlds. The Garath legal team, upon seeing this, requested a brief recess. The recess lasted 2 days. Coordinator Brell was appointed to manage the proceedings. She did not hide her satisfaction. The Garath returned with a challenge. Their argument was procedural. Darrow had no current command authority. He had formally stepped back from active duty after submitting his Earth assessment. He therefore had no standing to file on behalf of the Vreth Dominion or any protected body. Darrow's response was 4 pages long. He did not cite military authority. He did not invoke the Dominion's name. He worked entirely within the Council's own legal framework, citing 7 separate articles of the Galactic Common Protection Statutes, 2 of which most active diplomats had forgotten existed. Coordinator Brell, reading the brief, recognized the work of someone who had spent several months doing nothing but reading law. His core argument was simple. He had made direct contact with Earth's people. He had made, in his own words, an informal agreement of non-aggression. That agreement created a duty. He intended to honor it. The Garath challenged the definition of agreement. They argued that a meal and some fence work did not constitute a binding diplomatic engagement. Darrow's reply to this was 1 sentence. Tell me what word you would use for an old man who fed a stranger and asked for nothing and expected the best of them, and I will use that word instead. The hearing chambers were quiet after Senna read that into the record. Brell called the vote. The Garath claim was denied 14 votes to 2. On a Tuesday evening in Montana, Harl's government liaison called him. She explained, in general terms, what had happened, that a legal action had been filed against Earth by a third party, and that the action had been blocked. She did not go into all the details because some of them were still being processed, but she wanted him to know. Harl thanked her. He sat in the kitchen for a while after, looking at the photograph of Nora. Well, he said to her, I guess that's something. 6 months after that, on a morning in late spring, a ship landed in the south pasture again. Same ship, same careful approach, same steam from the underside. Harl was already in the east field when it landed. He had the wheelbarrow out and was working a section near the old oak tree where the soil always needed turning. He heard the landing and kept working. Footsteps across the field, slow and heavy, came up behind him. Stopped nearby. Harl turned. Darrow stood in the field, no armor this time, just a plain dark garment, Wide shoulders, the same pale gold eyes. Senna was not with it. No soldiers. Just Darrow, standing in the spring wheat with its hands at its sides. Harl looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at the section he was working. That fence on the north end needs resetting, he said. Same problem as the east side. Drainage. He handed Darrow the wheelbarrow handles. Darrow took them. They worked for 2 hours without talking much. The morning was cool, and the sky was the kind of pale blue that comes before the heat sets in for the summer. Birds were moving through the tree line. The wheat, still green, moved in the wind in long, slow waves. At one point, Senna's voice came through a small communicator on Darrow's belt, clicking something brief. Darrow clicked back. Short. Final. Clicked the communicator off. Council business? Harl asked. There's always council business now, Darrow said. Its speech had improved. Slower than Senna's. More careful, but its own. They want reports. Opinions. Assessments. A pause. I have become someone they ask. Is that bad? Darrow considered the question with the same seriousness it gave every question. No, it said. I think it is not bad. They finished the fence. Harl checked each post. They stood at the north edge of the property and looked out. The wheat fields ran to the tree line. The mountains beyond were still capped with white. The sky was clear from one end to the other. Darrow stood beside the old farmer in the spring light and looked at the world in a way it had never looked at any world before. Not as a target, not as a problem, not as something to be assessed and recorded and acted upon, just as a place that existed and was allowed to keep on existing. Harl picked up the wheelbarrow. Lunch in an hour, he said. Yes, said Darrow, and they walked back to the house together.